Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and today we are back with another LEGO Ninjago Dragons Rising review. Today we're going to be taking a look at Lloyd and Arin's Ninja Team Mechs. This was actually the very first Dragons Rising set they ever revealed accidentally. I think the checked LEGO Facebook site posted it months ago. It was our first look at the new show, and our first look at one of the new main characters, the new Ninja Arin. So very exciting to see this in a set. I cannot wait to get this showcased because it is a combo mech featuring Lloyd and Arin combining together. It is a very cool build, so without further ado, I think it's time we just jump into the review, and definitely stay tuned to the channel because we'll be reviewing all of the other Ninjago Dragons Rising sets if we haven't already. So I hope you enjoy, and let's go. Alright, so this is Lloyd and Arin's Ninja Team Mechs. It comes with 764 pieces, retails for $80 or 85 euros, 10.5 cent price to part ratio in the US, and 11.1 cent in euros. This comes with 5 minifigures, obviously Lloyd and Arin on the Ninja Team, as well as 3 members of Imperium, Raptin, who is a bounty hunter-esque character, as well as 2 of the elite guards, and this is a pretty unique concept for Ninjago in general. We've gotten a few types of builds like this before. The Ninja Ultra Combo Mech split up into multiple vehicles, and even in Nexo Knights we had a little mini mech spawn out of a larger mech, but nothing quite on this scale, and that's why I am actually really interested in taking a look at this and showcasing how the mechs actually work in conjunction with each other. So, if there are Bionicle fans in the audience, I'm gonna get the elephant out of the room, out of the way right now. This is Kitangu, right? If you're not a Bionicle fan, look up Bionicle Kitangu, you'll see what I mean. He introduced this color, Keyed Orange or Flame Yellowish Orange. He's got the eye, he's got the hat. It looks like Kitangu. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's actually take a look at the set itself. So I want to start off by looking at the minifigures because we've already done a minifigure mega review, so if you want to see my in-depth thoughts on how I feel about the new masks and cowls and the new minifigures themselves, do go check out the mega review, but here you can see Lloyd with 2 different expressions you can showcase on the mask itself, and if you want to see what the head looks like without the mask, this is what that looks like, a very serious expression for him, which is a good one because he is stepping up into the master role. Now, I am not the biggest fan of the way that the armor pieces in conjunction with the masks work for this wave because you just simply cannot turn their heads whatsoever, so they are forced to permanently look straight, even if you want to display them with the hair pieces on. If you want to turn their heads, you have to remove the armor because the mask part is part of the armor, which I'm not a big fan of. Arin here utilizes a specialized dual molded element for the cowl piece, which is a golden spike forehead here. He also has only one face because the hair piece that he uses does not fully cover the back of the head, so they actually paid attention to only giving him the one face there. You can see a look at his sweatshirt type of design here, and I like how he feels different to the other ninja in that his suit feels more cobbled together. He's using a sweatshirt, he's kind of just throwing together his own materials. He also is using a brand new weapon. This is a new rubberized mold for a grappling hook, which seems to be his signature weapon in the show. It's fun to play with, but not that easy to pose. Moving over to the villains, Raptin from the Imperium faction has 2 different expressions, a serious one and a very angry one showing his golden teeth. He also, like many of the minions of Imperium, is wielding this new dual molded gunmetal gray and transparent orange blade, which is very cool. It's kind of a holographic thing, also acts as a gun, you can point it this way, so a really cool thing to have in general. And removing the armor, you can see the torso design and the leg design, which is shared amongst all of the other minifigures in the set, but I think it works well because the over-detailing of these characters feels like they're from a different theme or a different world, which makes sense because they are literally from a different realm. Here is one of the Dragon Hunter generals here. This is one of the elite guards. The ones in black armor are the elite ones, the generals, and the ones with golden armor are the standard ones, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but I guess it makes sense in some sort of a way. You can see that there are 2 types of printing on the front and back. They did not need to print the back of the head, but they did because they could, which is nice. And I really like the helmet on this one. It feels like a samurai crossed with a beetle, and it just looks really cool. Lastly, there is one of the Royal Guards. This is an elite Royal Guard because it is, again, that black color scheme, utilizing a brick-built weapon that has the finger pieces that were introduced this year for large mechs as kind of dragon grabbers, which I think works out well. The helmet's a little goofy. I just can't unsee a frying pan here, and it doesn't help that they literally used it as a frying pan in Ninjago City markets, but I really do like the head expression of the eye being a center eye there to really kind of act almost like maybe it could shoot a laser out of the front. Moving aside from the minifigures though, I think it's time we just take a look at the main set in general, because this is a really cool looking set. So obviously you have two different mechs here. You have an Arin mech and you have a Lloyd mech, and what we're going to do is I will place the minifigures inside the mechs themselves so you can actually see what they look like piloting their mechs. Arin just kind of stands in right here and the cockpit closes up around him, whereas Lloyd has a seat in his mech so you can kind of sit him down if you can get his feet on the studs, and then that closes up around him like so. It's a nice setup to be able to mount the minifigures, and it's just a really fun one to have in general. So first, let's look at the posability when both of the mechs are combined, and this was what I was most curious about, because obviously you have one mech here with ball joints of its own that straps around another mech, and I was super curious to see exactly how this would hose up posability-wise. Surprisingly enough, they actually gave this mech knees. For something as crazy as this with a really interesting integration feature, I was not expecting knees whatsoever, but it does have knees, and you can actually kind of still articulate the feet even with the other mech in there. There is still some range of motion, but most of the heavy lifting is going to be done by those knees, and I'm going to be honest, you can't really get this into many other poses with the both mechs attached, even with the knees, because the feet are very limited in articulation. You can only really twist them back and forth. You cannot bend them forwards and backwards, which is a good thing because this mech does have the propensity to fall over a lot, even with these safeguards. So in terms of the armor on the side, these are all actually mounted on ball joints, which is really interesting. These are mounted on mini ball joints, and these Technic panel elements kind of just curve around the set itself, forming some sort of protective armor. You've also got these dark green new recolors of the armor piece for Ninjago being used on ball joints themselves, and the head, which is probably one of my biggest disappointments of the set. The head does not stay up. I would like the head to look something like this, right? I think this is a really cool position for it. It looks really nice, like kind of it is elevated above the ground, but as soon as you let go, let me just put that back, as soon as you let go, the head just droops down, and that's really disappointing. Like, I think it would be really cool if you were able to have this, but no matter what you do, the head will just droop down. It is impossible to get the head to stay up. This may just be me being unlucky. Maybe you will have different results when you build it yourself, but I don't know, I feel like they could have easily solved this by just mounting the head on a ball joint instead of a single Technic pin, and it's just kind of sad because this is a cool look, right? Like, this is a really cool look for the mech to have the hat be somewhat elevated off the ground, but you can't do it. You just cannot get it to hold the pose, and there's nothing you can really do about that. Now, there are some ways you can kind of get around it. You can flatten out the head like this, so I guess that works. It is cheating because this is sitting on the armor. Like, if the armor wasn't there, it would droop down even more. Like, if that armor piece wasn't there... Okay, well, now it's sitting on Lloyd's head. So, right, there you go. Without Lloyd there, it will just droop down more and more. It has to sit on something. Like, it needs to rest on something to actually stay up, and that's really disappointing to me. So, yes, you can kind of get it to stand up based on the way that you position the armor, but notice, as soon as I moved it, the head drooped down again. So, I don't really like that. I feel like that just could have used a couple more times in iteration to get that right. In terms of the arm articulation, you can move the arms around on ratchet joints back and forth. Obviously, you can actually cause this to move up and down, but because of the way the Technic armor panels are mounted, there's not a lot that you can do with the articulation of the arms. There's a little bit that you can do, but it's pretty restricted because of the way the Technic panels are set. You also can really just only rotate the hands. They are mounted on Mixel joints, but they are essentially fixed to be able to only rotate around one axis like this, and it does tend to kind of get caught sometimes just because of the way everything is set up, which feels, again, like this is a really cool concept for a design, but maybe could have used just a couple more iterations to really perfect the way that you can play with it. The other hand is not holding anything, so it's a little bit easier to get this one into poses, but again, it does kind of tend to catch. Just there are little things that do catch around the way it's built, and you can't do that much with it. Like, as soon as you have it maybe reaching outwards, you kind of have to bend the shoulder armor out of the way. The shoulder armor looks really cool, don't get me wrong, but it does limit articulation quite a lot to having the hands mostly just kind of on its sides in kind of a standard pose like this, because that way, it's a lot of stuff you have to finick around with and move around, but that way you can actually get this into somewhat of a standing pose. Looking at the back of the mech, this is what it looks like. The entire thing is built on a single hinge, which means it does kind of have waist articulation. Not in this format though, because obviously with the front mech installed, you can't really move around the waist. But they did have waist articulation. Again, this is a really ambitious set. Like this, they went crazy in terms of trying to make this feel very ambitious. There's also a place to put Lloyd's swords on the back, which I do appreciate. Always having places to hold weapons is a good thing, and I like how they do have those clips there, so you can choose to do that. But very ambitious in articulation in the build, and I just feel could have used maybe a few more iterations. So that's a very interesting way that this is set up. But now let's showcase how the actual splitting feature works, because then we can really show you how this actually can be posed. Yeah, I just snapped the arm off. Yeah, it's a little goofy to pose around with everything on this. So the way that the mech detaches and attaches is super simple. You just pull it out, like so. You can then remove the feet from the stirrups, so to speak. The blue pin is not supposed to be there. It's supposed to detach alongside the Arin mech itself, but it's not bad. I mean, it just kind of has a pin sticking out of the back. We'll set this aside for now, and we'll take a look at that later. And then that leaves us with this. So let me just kind of try to get this in a semblance of a better pose, and then we can take a look at what this actually looks like as a build. So let's get the head out of the way. We can use the armor to wrap around the arms here, and with the other mech out of the way, you can really kind of close up the way the armor works around the body itself. Now, it's a little bit, again, difficult to pose the hands because of the armor pieces that are in the way. The shoulder pauldrons are almost too much. Sometimes the weight of the weapon is too much as well, so you really can only get it into a very limited number of poses. This also falls off a lot. It is a recolored Ninjago Seabound blade element. At the end of the tip of the blade, I think it looks cool, but it does fall off quite a lot. But okay, this is a pose, and now we can see the full articulation of what this mech can do without the additional mech attached. So what you can do is, obviously, you can really get this into all sorts of like running poses and playing around with it, with the knees being mounted on ball joints using those new golden sockets they introduced this year for Zane's Ice Dragon Creature. Bionicle fans rejoice. Those are really good that you're able to use those to really just get this moving around and walking. You can only splay the legs out to a certain degree, and the way it's built is actually somewhat similar to Jay's Titan mech earlier this year, with an actual body that's bent inwards. Now you can actually showcase the waist articulation, because now, with the other mech out of the way, you can get this articulating upwards. You can really just bend this back and forth. There goes that piece again. This falls off. This keeps falling off over and over again. Because as soon as it hits something, the joint just pops right out. It's kind of disappointing, but that is how that poses. This requires a lot of play and a lot of messing around with to get it into a good pose, I will say. It's not impossible to get it into a good pose, but it does require just a lot of meddling with it because of the way the armor pieces are mounted. That being said, I like the ambition. I like that they went for a mech with knees. I like that they have a cool color scheme in dark green. Aesthetically, once you get it posed up, it looks pretty cool. Like, this is a really cool looking, almost samurai-esque mech, and I just like the way that this is designed overall. And I also really do like some of the other Japanese influences on it. The way that the feet are positioned in traditional Japanese footwear, that's really cool. The color scheme transitioning from dark green to tan, the dark tan here is great as well. It feels very clunky. Each of the fingers can be individually articulated, and the dark orange adds a really cool splash of color to the mech, which is an interesting design motif for Lloyd himself. But with that, I think we have taken a look at Lloyd's version of the mech, and we can now move on to the Arin mech, which is basically a standard Ninjago core mech with just a little bit of something special going on with it. So pivoting downwards here, let's take a closer look at the Arin mech here. This is, for all intents and purposes, in terms of posability, just a regular core mech, but one thing I really do like is that the designers stated they wanted to make this feel completely different than anything we've seen before for the regular Ninja. So what they've done is they've basically given him these very beefy knee pads. They're utilizing the Nexo Knight's armor piece on the knees to just give it a little bit of extra shaping. They also have recolored the Ninjago Dragon Jaw element in a special print here, which is very cool to get a specialized print for the mech and really emphasize that whole Dragon's Rising aspect where Arin is piloting a dragon-themed mech. Thankfully, the hands are on Mixel joints as well, or mini ball joints, so you can articulate the way that the hands move. If they were just fixed straight, I definitely would have more problems with it, but thankfully they are not, so you can really get this into all sorts of cool poses and just really play around with it. I mean, thankfully, because this is somewhat limited in articulation, there's no knees, there's no elbows, the amount of poses you can do are limited but not impossible, and it's actually easier because you don't have to mess around with so many moving parts to just get this in a cool pose. Unlike the other mech, which almost has too many points of articulation with the armor pieces all being jointed and the knees and everything, this is a refreshing taste of just what it is like to play around with a Ninjago mech, and I like it. I like the color scheme, I like the integration of dark green with the keyed orange, and I think it's a pretty cool vehicle for Arin to pilot, although I am very excited for him to eventually get his own vehicles and his own sets to himself. Now, let's take a quick look at what it looks like to combine the mechs again, so we can just showcase that on camera, because it is a somewhat non-trivial task. You can get the big Kitangu mech over here, and what you do is super simple. What you need to do first is take the tips of the feet and stick them in these stirrup pieces here, kind of the ways that it can be seated and enclosed inside the mech itself. And then you pop that in, and really that's all there is to it in terms of posing this mech and getting them reattached. Now you can get this back into a good pose. Let's see if we can kind of click this downwards and really fold up the armor again, get the weapon to be facing out, rotate the foot here, and see what we can do to get this into a semblance of a good pose again. There's something going on with the posing of this, but yeah, okay, there you go. This is basically what you can do with it. So overall, I think it's now time we talk about concluding thoughts on this mech. It's a really smart idea. You cannot fault it for the ingenuity, for the creativity, and aesthetically, when you do spend the time to get it into good poses, it does pose really well. Like, it looks pretty cool. Do I wish the head? The biggest complaint to me, I think, in posability, the head. I really do wish, yes, I do wish the head did not just have to rest on something. I'm cheating now because I'm having it rest on this armor piece right here. Like, this is what it's hitting. It's also resting on Lloyd's head here, so I would like it to do, like, something a little bit higher, but it's not going to support that weight. So you make do with what you can, right? That's not that big of a deal, I guess, because you can get it to pose up, but it is just something I thought I would point out, is that the head just doesn't stay up straight. The thing with me with this set is that it feels almost like this is a prototype and they could have just done one more iteration. There are so many things that are almost perfect. There are pieces that just pop off down here that I feel like could have been fixed or removed. The head, almost perfect. You could have mounted it on a different joint and it would have been fine. The armor, I feel like there's almost too many connection points. They could have just made them one piece connected together and then mounted that on ball joints. There's just so many things about the mech that feel like it almost got there and it almost was a really good set, but are just little minor grievances with how it is able to be posed, with how easy it is to play around with, that makes this not that much fun to play around with because you're spending most of your time playing with it, trying to pose it. And that's not really that much fun in a Ninjago build. If you're spending all your time trying to pose the build instead of playing with it, with stuff falling off of it, like the back red piece falls off, and then you've got all sorts of little pieces here that can pop off, like the hands were popping off and whatnot. Again, just feel like they could have just put this in the iteration cycle for a little more and just made it perfect. It's nice, but flawed. I think that's the best way that I can put things, is that it's a fun set, but a flawed set. But now let's talk about value. This is $80 US. So breaking that down, let's say that the core mech itself is $10. They have sold these separately for $10 before. The main Lloyd mech, $60, I would say. So that brings us to $70. I don't really know where we're getting $80 from. I definitely feel like this should have been a $70 set, not an $80 set. In Europe, though, 85 euros, which retails for $91.86, that's not good. That is pretty ridiculous, I think, that this is close to $100 in Europe, which I don't think it's worth that at all. Not $100 for sure, not $91. 80 is pushing it, right? 80 is within the realm of reasonability, I think, for the US, but it's already pushing it. In Europe, it's not great. It's almost the opposite problem that the Elemental Dragon versus Empress mech has, where that one's $130 in the US, 105 euros, so I was like, okay, the Euro price is pretty good, or okay. The US price is not. This is the opposite. The US price is acceptable, the Euro price just isn't. So depending on your region, this may or may not be worth it. I think that, honestly, this is a really good set for people who like to modify their sets. There's a lot of things that I feel could have been made better with small modifications to the way it's built. So if you're a modder, if you like to customize your sets, it is LEGO after all, if you like to improve your sets, this is actually a really good set to get because it's almost perfect, it provides a really good starting template, and I'd love to see someone take this and really transform it into a solid Ninjago mech. It's not quite perfect because there's so many things that you have to fiddle around with it, and it feels a little bit fragile in the way things are set up, and I'm not super convinced by the transformation feature, although I do think it is one of the better transformation features we've gotten in a long time. It just feels like this isn't quite perfect, but it is a good set for modding. If you want your sets to be absolutely good from the get-go and not have many problems, then maybe this set isn't for you, because it is a little bit frustrating having to spend so much time posing it and having things fall off and having it fall over. That's what I can say about the set, but this has just been my own honest opinion of it, and of course let me know in the comments what your experience has been with the set once the set actually does release, and I hope you enjoyed this review.
Alright, and with that we have summed up our look at Lloyd and Arin's Ninja Team Mechs. Thank you so much for tuning into this video, and I'm really curious, what are your thoughts on the set? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? What do you think about it? And how do you think it stacks up against the other sets in the first Dragons Rising wave? Thank you all so much for tuning into Deck Bricks. Like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Thank you so much, and bye for now.